mispronounce any words. English is not my first language, so here are some facts about the author. Oscar Wilde, born 1855, died 1900. Oscar Wilde was born in Dublin, Ireland. He was a clever, educated man and went to university in Dublin and Oxford. He is famous for his plays, stories, Chapter 1. The bloodstain on the floor. The house was very big. To the Otis family, who had just arrived in England from America, it also seemed very old. However, it wasn't until they stepped out of the carriage that they saw how big it was. They had to crane their necks backwards to take it all in. Also, little pause. These bold birds, they are there for translation. These words or these idioms are quite unusual for Czech speakers, so there is always the translation at the bottom of the page, so we know what the idiom means in Czech. So let's continue. Wow, said Virginia Otis, the only girl in the family. She thought it was the grandest thing she had ever seen. Doesn't look haunted to me, said the twin one, Georgie. Nor to me, said the twin two, Harry. Parrot, said twin one. It's all rubbish, this ghost stuff, said their older brother, Washington. They think we Americans will believe anything. Canterville Chase was the name of their new home. Mr. Otis had bought it from old Lord Canterville, whose family had lived there for 100 years. Oddly, he had warned Mr. Otis against buying it. He said the Cantervilles had been haunted out of the house at home. There was supposed to be a 300-year-old ghost flitting around at night and scaring people out of their wits. Here's a picture of the family arriving in the house. Mr. Otis had just laughed. We'll buy the house and everything inside it, and that includes any ghost, she said. Everyone thought they were completely mad. Virginia sort of agreed too, but for different reasons. To be honest, she wouldn't have minded a ghost. The house was miles from anywhere. She could see the months, even years of boredom ahead. A ghost would liven things up a bit. Although when they arrived, it wasn't ghostly weather at all. It was a hot, sunny day in the middle of July. But as they began locking their suitcases to the huge front door, something strange happened. Simon disappeared. He didn't even leave a note. She glared around the room as if expecting Sir Simon to come leaping out of the paneling at any second. His body has never been found, but his guilty ghost still haunts this house. Mark my words, Mrs. Otis. Here's the picture of the stain. Poppycock, cried Washington, leaping to his feet. Complete rubbish. If you'd get me some pots clean away, I'll clear it up in a jiffy. I wouldn't do that, sir, said Mrs. Umney in gloomy tones. I'll get it myself, said Washington. A few minutes later, he was back and down on his hands and knees, scrubbing away. Mrs. Umney looked terrified. What are you doing? She cried. Look, I told you, said Washington proudly. He lifted the glove. All gone. Just then, something else strange happened. The whole room went a stark white. Then there was a sudden boom, shocking, pale peal of thunder. Everyone leaped up except Mrs. Umney. She fainted. Worst of all, Georgie disappeared. There are quite many words hard for me because I'm not familiar with them in casual speaking. So I'm sorry if I have to read a word or sentence twice. Okay. Oh my goodness, cried Mrs. Otis. Georgie, dear boy, where are you? For a moment, even Mr. Otis and Washington believed that something ghostly and ghastly had happened to the twin one. Then they heard a muffled voice. It was coming from Mrs. Umney. Help! Help! A small, pale hand seemed to poke out from her left side. Heavens! Cried Mrs. Otis. What is happening? Mr. Otis helped Mr. Umney up from the floor, and Washington found her with a newspaper. To everyone's relief, there was Georgie, a bit flattened, but all in one piece. I feel like the mic is quite far away. I'll just move it. Okay. Well, said Mrs. Otis, what an eventful start. And after making sure both Mrs. Umney and Georgie were unhurt, she suggested that the family should go up to their rooms. You shouldn't have done that, Mr. Washington, she said. That blood has been there for centuries.